Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of AA Meetings. I'm Ahmed, and Abdi is actually joining us. How graceful of him.
I know.
To yeah.
Yeah, I'm just preparing for wave 2, 700 new cases.
Yeah.
So I didn't know the people were making a big deal about the casinos opening in Ontario.
I mean, to announce on the same day that there's a wave 2 that's going to be worse than the wave 1, and that starting this morning casinos are open, I mean, that's a bit shocking, a bit jarring.
I know. I feel sorry for whoever had to develop that comms plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, are we going to start with the casinos? Or the fact that it's worse than wave 1? And I didn't even... was there projections that made it clear that it was going to be worse than wave 1?
It was their health officials.
I don't even know what's being
it was their medical chief that said that it was going to be worse than the second wave, the first wave. Yeah, but that's Ontario news. I don't think most of our listeners are Ontario-based, unfortunately. There's still time for you guys to come. I'd say wait until 2022 until we get rid of Doug Ford, or come beforehand and help us. You don't need to be a citizen of Canada to vote in Toronto's mayoral election, so you could at the very least help us get rid of John Tory. So just come on over. We'll be welcome to have you.
Well, there's a lot of New Yorkers and people from Los Angeles and California on the move. For New York, it's just the rent prices, but for California, it's a couple of reasons. So, if anybody's looking for a new place to live,
Toronto's great. I mean, there are projections I've read that by 2050, Toronto's going to have more people than LA.
Oh my God,
that's shocking.
So get in the housing market.
So you guys better come in right now, man. Get in on the ground floor, or not the ground floor. The city's like 160 years old, but get in. Yeah. But I think I mostly wanted to discuss the dynamic that's occurring within the Democratic Party, on the left, with regards to the election. I don't see much actual support for Joe Biden, even from his supporters. I don't see people encouraging others. What was that?
Enthusiasm?
I don't see people, doing the work of convincing people to vote for Joe Biden, talking about why he would be better or whatnot. What I see is the Biden-supporting wing of the Democratic Party just focusing their attacks on the left counter-attacking, and this just in-party bickering, as opposed to actually expanding the base, right? That's what I've seen dominating the political discussion. I wanted to just touch on those a little bit, right? Because there are, I think most everybody who listens to our show knows that I don't have a problem necessarily with attacking Joe Biden for his faults, right? I point out his policy failings, his personality failings, and whatnot, historical weaknesses of his record. The reason I do that mostly is because I'm one to prevent people from assuming that electing Biden is going to be enough, right? That even though I think that it's a necessary step towards where we're going, I don't want people to go through the same process with Obama, where we got our guy into office and now we can just relax and trust him to do everything for us, because oftentimes we see that our interests and the political interests of the Democratic Party are not in line, right? So it's important for me to make clear to people, I think, that Joe Biden, support him in this election, but don't go into it with any illusions about who he is or what he will accomplish, and understand that much of your work is still ahead of you, and that work will also include combating Joe Biden, right, on certain issues in which he's to the right of us, right? That's where I try to come at it from, right? I'm not one of the people who criticize electoral. So I wanted to first discuss, what do you think about, the validity of criticizing Joe Biden? Because there's a huge segment of the Democratic Party who pounces on you. Like I said, they focus their entire energy on attacking people who make left criticisms of Joe Biden, slandering them as like paid, useful idiots and whatnot. And what do you think about that? Do you think like it's even if you don't agree with them on those extreme points, do you think that people should be holding off on criticisms of Joe Biden until the election?
I think the fact that I don't know, Democrats or people that support Democrats usually shift towards focusing on the presidential race, and deservedly so, of course. It's one of the three branches of government. But for me, as we mentioned in the show, the leadership at the House and Senate level is really what needs a refresh as well, right? Because it could be that he doesn't win the presidency, but there are a sweeping number of Democrats that enter the House and the House and the Senate. And we've mentioned before with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, there's a stagnation there, right? With the policies and the agenda that's being overtaken. I actually saw someone mention the fact that the New York Times was able to get their hands on Donald Trump's tax returns before the Democratic leadership could, right? Of course, the circumstances are different, but what people are getting at is kind of the ineptitude and the lack of vision.
Oftentimes to complicity, right? Agreement with Donald Trump and Chuck Schumer. Oftentimes, like we with his shakedown of the company TikTok, instead of like calling it out for what it was just like a cynical attempt by don't want to make the episode about that. But Chuck Schumer's point was, I was saying this months before. I'm ahead of Donald Trump on this issue, right? It's not Donald Trump's idea. So they are so focused on being seen as either they're focused on being seen as moderate, or they are actually in agreement with him. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Effectively, they're extra votes on his legislation, right?
Yeah.
But continue.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it's easy to just rag on Joe Biden, and I feel like it bypasses.
It's fun too.
Kind of, I mean it's fun, but it bypasses the crux of the issue for the Democratic Party, right? Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have outlasted Joe Biden in his current role as presidential candidate. So the stagnation of the party and the kind of suppression of new ideas and lack of clear vision has outdated Biden's presidential run. So if people are just looking at Joe Biden and saying Joe Biden is receiving these talking points, right? And Joe Biden is receiving intel on what is palatable or what the strategy should be for the Democratic Party at a national level. So if there's a lack of excitement in his platforms, I don't think it's just Joe Biden that's coming up with that, right?
For sure, that's like that and I've criticized this multiple times, especially in your absence. The lack of a campaign. They feel like they just by not showing up, by not talking about any policies, they will minimize the chance of them alienating people, right? They're afraid of upsetting people who hate Trump, and such that they might reevaluate their vote for Biden or just stay home, right? So they feel like if we don't give people anything to criticize us about, then we can just skate through the election without any mud sticking on us, right? Let's just make it a referendum on Donald Trump. The problem with that, though, is a lot of the problems, Yeah, I mean, there's a reason Donald Trump became president. It's because of the failure that was the Obama administration, right? And if you were to just bring people back to the place they were beforehand, assume that there isn't anything that needs to be changed except for the person who holds the president, then not only are you it's worse than bringing us back to 2016, because the country is dramatically worse condition than it was right there, right? And that kind of politics was untenable back then. And 4 years later, the country is much more unstable, right? And much more polarized, much more divided. And a repeat of that inept presidency, even for 4 years, will potentially be disastrous, right? I feel like it's important for us. I mean, I think of the left as more and more as this year has gone on as a separate almost entity to the mainstream of the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, right? And that if Donald Trump loses, Biden is elected, Biden begins pushing think about it from the right wing, is just views us all as a monolith, right? They view Kamala Harris and Joe Biden as communists and secret communists and whatnot. And they don't see any political distinction between us, so that's the way our opponents are going to frame it. And if we act as if we are in lockstep and in agreement with it, even though we are deeply opposed on a policy level, then it's going to seem as if there are no viable alternatives to conservatism, right? So I think it must be it must be made clear to people that this is a tacit vote for Joe Biden, and that much of the work that's going to have to be done, like I said, is going to be actively in combat with Joe Biden, right? So that's my focus, is creating that distinction I think that will be important after the election, in the 2020 to 2022 legislative session, and the 2022 primary, the 2024 election. All those times, I think it's going to be important for people to see the left as distinct from the Joe Biden wing of the party, and to understand that any policy criticisms that they have of the Democratic Party are criticisms of that tired old neoliberal wing that Joe Biden represents, right? So even though, yes, that's a better alternative to Donald Trump, I fear they're just, because Americans often, they just jump back and forth between parties just because of a sense of dissatisfaction. Not just Americans. We know, in Ontario, we had 15 years or so of a liberal government. Had huge policy benefits for $15 minimum wage, free college tuition, advancements in childcare. They extended kindergarten to full time, extended preschooling. Lots of really good tangible benefits, but they were just in power for so long, and that and people began to just project all their dissatisfactions with life onto the government, right? So my life has not changed enough, so I'm just going to go with the other side, right? Even though the other side is a fucking huckster, Doug Ford, right? Who's running the country, the province to the ground. People were just I've had enough of this side for a while. I'm dissatisfied with them. I'm just going to go to the other side, right? That's the problem that you get into. So when a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump weren't necessarily right wingers, they just let me just shake things up, right? The system might need. So there is just that two-party dynamic, and neither of those two parties really present issues that appeal to lower class and working class people, then there's going to be room for that kind of vacillation, which wouldn't necessarily happen if there was a left party, a left group, not necessarily a party, a bloc that was saying, this is not what we stand for, there is another way, right? And I feel like if you don't make that criticism, if you don't point that out before the election, it's going to be a lot harder to do. So I don't criticize Joe Biden in a way that would make somebody not vote for him. It's just I criticize. That's like I said earlier. I don't want people going into it with any illusions, right? But at the same time, it's how do you make that calculation between what is a valid criticism of him to make, or what, are there any things that you think I should a person should hold off on, right?
Yeah, I I mean, what do you think about the necessary evil argument? Because
lesser two evils.
Lesser two evils. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because people who dislike him usually go in that route, and to make it palatable to vote for him.
Yeah.
I think that the alternative is pretty grim.
For sure.
Honest.
I totally agree with that.
I don't even know if it's lesser or like lopsided or like minuscule or two. So, I mean, I think the strength that we mentioned maybe in a Joe Biden presidency is that he would surround himself with people that would hopefully, that would assist him. And I'm not talking about assisting in terms of delivering speeches. I know the right usually likes to go at Joe Biden with regards to that. And we'll see his delivery and his mental fitness on Tuesday. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, will we see it because of all the drugs they're pumping him with? Will we see his true acuity, his true mental state, because of all the performance-enhancing drugs Donald Trump is accusing him of pumping himself up with? Right? Are we going to see real Joe Biden? Yeah, he's actually saying he challenged him to have a drug test. Joe Biden, his campaign, had a really good response to it. I thought it made me really laugh when Donald Trump was asking them why they wouldn't refuse to have a drug test, and they said the Joe Biden plans to make his case to the American people in words. If Donald Trump wants to do it in urine, he can do it. Go ahead, right? It was a good line. You have to give him credit where credit's due. But what I was I think what I hear a lot from leftists is that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party are integral in the maintenance of the system that has given us Donald Trump, right? So they see both sides as a continuation of it. Even though they agree that there are distinct differences, they don't see electing a Democrat as something that's going to prevent them, right? Prevent that from happening. I disagree, just because these offices do wield a lot of power, right? Republicans, much more so than Democrats, are pretty creative in their uses of these offices, right? In exacting their pushing forward their political agenda, right? It's almost as if when the Republicans are in power, the barbarians are in the gates. Oftentimes because they can't think about the impact that would have on we know California, for example, has they have this constitutional provision that says that taxes cannot be raised except for with a referendum, right? They are never able to raise taxes because of how unpopular the concept of a tax raise has become in America, right? So if you do have a party that cuts taxes heavily, like the Republicans do when they get in office, in the Trump tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts, then that limits the ability for us to allocate funds to the programs that we want, right? And makes Medicare for all, these kind of things, like public tuition, all that a lot harder to do, because we have to spend a lot of time just digging out of the hole the Republicans got us into, right? So although the election of Biden isn't necessarily going to transform anybody's life, it's just going to make our task less daunting, right? Although politically it makes it slightly more difficult, because we are battling. We're almost splitting the Democratic Party at that point, right? When you're fighting for, it's harder to advocate for stronger policies that benefit people when the Democrats hold office and are able to paint that all as pie in the sky. We think about there was Donald Trump's tax reports was released in 2000. The first 2 years he paid $750 and whatnot. There's one a bit of that New York Times article where they talked about this $72 million tax rebate that he got, right? And the reason he was able to get that tax rebate was because of Obama provision, right? And Obama made that possible. So it's
is it the extension of the Bush tax cut that?
Not that. What it was like it was they extended the window with which you could declare losses, and Donald Trump declared losses that he otherwise wouldn't have been able to, and that got him back all the money that he paid in taxes before. So he made a lot of money with Apprentice, paid like $72 million in taxes, got all of that back in a tax rebate because of an Obama provision, right? So it's like, yeah, it's tricky because like at that time though, like Bernie Sanders and whatnot was like actively opposing many of these like tax cuts and these tax provisions, saying they were going to be long-term detrimental to it. And the Obama campaigned, Obama's presidency, Obama, I think he directly used the term in describing Bernie Sanders' criticism of it as sanctimonious, right? So it becomes harder to make the case when the mainstream of the Democratic Party is in office and they feel as if it's in their best interest to tar you and make you seem like a bunch of radical, unhinged, crazy people, like pie in the sky stuff, right? But that's political. That's just messaging that can be overcome. But the harm that's done with the Republicans is like financial, tangible, and also oftentimes they reduce the ability of people to organize. Right, like they make it harder for people to unionize. Right, they make it. Yeah, they strip the powers of unions that already exist. Right, a lot of the. What they do is, because they're more calculating, more cunning, is they use their power to systematically undermine the ability of the left to accrue any power to combat them with, right? So that's not something that's necessarily going to be happening as effectively from the Democrats. So it's like, yes, we're going to be in a tricky situation in a Biden presidency, but that's like, I don't think that's a reason not to vote for him or anything, right? Because of
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, like the lesser of two evils. Like, I mean, it's people say it all the time. It's still like lesser, right? It's evil, but it's like I don't know.
Yeah, but America has a two-party system. So I mean, the people who are like considering staying at home, the question becomes: is it palatable for you, or is it okay for you, or are you willing to come to terms with this administration continuing?
Well, it's
right. So it's not I feel like it's short-sighted to just be like, I don't like both parties.
For sure, yeah.
I'm gonna not vote. The other thing is that, and I think this. I just want to make this point. I understand that it's hard for people, because I saw something where you see how many people complain about Bill de Blasio in New York City, right?
Yeah.
I think somewhere I was watching a video where that man was mentioning that it's pretty much impossible for that guy to get it right for New York, right? Mm-hmm. Just because of the fact that he has to appeal to the hipsters in Dumbo while appealing to the rich people. I can't remember what.
I mean,
rich
he's no Fiorello LaGuardia.
Rich people in Manhattan, the people who want police reform, along with the NYPD. He just pretty much has an impossible job, right? So I think the criticisms against him, a lot of people say like he's smug and he's arrogant and whatnot, but the question becomes like, does the vitriol that he received really warrant the job that he's done? And you can make an argument. I'm not saying
I will make that argument right now. I'll actually make that.
It's not even my central point. I just want to get, because we can go and deviate into that direction, but it's not my central point. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that out of the around 8 million people that live in New York City, only about 700,000 came out to vote. Mm-hmm. That's less than 10% of people actually elected the mayor.
Yeah.
Right? So you hate him. You hate his guts. It seems like a majority of it, or a good portion of the city, hate his guts. But only 10% of people can be bothered to engage in the
for sure.
Process, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I get it. People No, I mean, the situation is dire, right? For people on a day-to-day basis, they're worried about their paycheck. They only received $1,200 from the federal government. The politics seems so toxic, trash. Families can't even discuss it, you know? Like, when you're on the ground, it's like, you're worried about how you can take care of your family. So it's very easy for people to disengage with the political process. But what they find themselves doing is not voting sometimes, and then coming to a shock once their inaction, partially their inaction, and then part of it is the Democratic Party's inability to kind of rally them to come to the polls. Well, part of their inaction leads them to kind of exist in this kind of bewilderment, right? Like, where they're just shocked about how this administration can get away with this. And part of the reason is because you've pretty much been kind of fooled. I think there was a story that I was seeing about how the Trump campaign actually had a strategy to get black voters to not come to the polls.
Yeah.
So the Republicans, a lot of their method of winning is pretty much disengaging the most amount of people that they can.
They actually admit it.
Their voters the easiest. Yeah, and they've admitted it. Right?
There was the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, the founder of it, in a famous video said that we do better when less people vote. Right, they know that. That's why they consistently attempt to disenfranchise voters in every black community everywhere. Right, it doesn't matter if it's the whitest state in the place. If there's a single black community, they're going to be attempting to suppress that vote in any way they can, whether or not it's by refusing people the right to vote. Or refusing them the right to vote by creating a carceral state that's funnels them in and restrict some of their rights, or just stealing their limiting the amount of polling. They have many tactics that they use, but I wouldn't the point where people don't. You said he got elected with 10% of it. Oftentimes, and we saw this with Bernie's campaign a lot. The reason these people are checked out of politics is because they genuinely don't see any tangible benefit as coming to them, right? They don't have politicians who come out and promise them something that will make a benefit in their lives. That's why I'm so upset with Joe Biden's a tactic of not saying anything, because if you don't give these people anything, then it's just going to be like every other race that they thought, okay, how much is my life going to change, right? And the problem though is the reason. I don't know if it's necessarily the reason, but a solution to not having options within the current electoral structure that seem like they're going to be beneficial to you. The solution to that is to carve out a space for politicians who will, right? To shift the leadership, to be more engaged in the transformation of the party, to actually take it over. So I see a lot of people saying, okay, electoralism, what's the point of voting? It's not going to change your life. It's kind of weird that it's strange because these people, many of the people who are making these arguments now were Bernie supporters in the primary, right? If they, as we were, if anyone wants to listen to our back catalog, and the thing is if you didn't believe in electoralism, you wouldn't have cared if Bernie won the primary or not, right? They say this, but I don't think they actually mean it, right? These offices, if they're held by people who can make change, Joe Biden's probably not going to be that person, but if they are held by people who are, then they can have sweeping benefits towards the status of life for people. We think about extreme examples like FDR's, for all his flaws, his New Deal, LBJ much more flawed with his Great Society, right? These are tangible benefits that are help people today, right? Senior citizens not having to worry about medical costs except for pharmaceuticals, right? That's huge, right? The Social Security, right? And these things, even though they begin as software programs, they shift the dynamics such that they can be expanded. Like Social Security, when it began, was for widows and orphans, right? It's expanded to cover more people, and hopefully with Medicare, it could eventually be expanded larger. But if it wasn't for electoralism, then we would not have the structure with which to that. You understand what I'm saying, right? So like we have to, I'm cynical about the Democratic Party too, but instead of just leaving that cynicism, and you have to do something about it, right? If you don't like the Democratic Party, we don't see them as being representative or active or even beneficial, then you have to shift the party. And I totally understand, I totally agree with many of, the vast majority of the criticisms that these people make of the Democratic Party as feckless or complicit, as being better advocates of certain policies, right? Like you think about the Bush tax cuts. There was those were temporary. A Republican administration probably could not have made that permanent. Barack Obama could, right? Because he could neutralize the Democratic Party opposition to it. So there's some points in which the Democratic Party, as it's currently structured, is a better advocates for the policies that harm the workers and poor people than the Republican Party are. However, that's just the Democratic Party in its current state. So you change the state of it, right? And you do that by actively being participating. And I feel like oftentimes it's people think about presidential politics and politics every 4 years, and it's something that with socialism and leftist policies, people cannot be introduced to them initially in an election year, right? People have to be engaged in these things and see these left movements as being, they're standing in solidarity with them, not as a group of people who tell you which way to vote, which policies are better, because they're used to that. They've been seeing that their entire lives, right? So we can't just if we just say, okay, electoralism is bullshit, so we're just going to ignore this whole thing. No, we need to outside of the election year begin the work of transforming this party, and much of it is by pointing out the people and the institutions which push it to the right, right? So the individual politicians like Nancy Pelosi for stuff like that, right? Yeah. The benefits of having primaries. So we saw Lacey Clay in Missouri lost to Cory Bush. In New York, Eric Adams lost to Jamal Bowman. Huge improvements, right? AOC in Congress, Ilhan Omar, the squad, Rashida Tlaib. These are people who I think every leftist would may have individual problems with these people, or one or two of them, but will see their election as a positive trend within the Democratic Party, right? And how did that happen? Yeah. It happened through boring old electoralism, right? There hasn't been much tangible changes in people's lives that have been wrought by a AOC or Ilhan Omar now, because they haven't been in power. But if the process that got them elected is repeated in more districts, and the left bloc in the Democratic Party rises in ascendancy such that they drown out the so-called moderate voices, then there is a potential that wide-sweeping changes could be made in people's lives through presidential politics, right? And I think that's what people understood that in a sense, which is why they were so excited by Bernie. But now that they don't have a candidate on the top, they are sliding back to that same disillusionment, which is totally understandable given the history of the Democratic Party, but I think is a bit mistaken, right? And I feel like all these stance, we have to understand too that the power, the control of the Democratic Party, by the centrists right now, is not something that's going to be given up easily, and the maintenance of that is a political project which they're arguably more interested in than the presidential election, right? They are going to use any opportunity that they have to frame the left as irrational, as pie in the sky, as perfectionistic, or to frame us in the minds of the mainstream voters as people who cannot be relied on or whatnot, right? And I feel we have to understand that's what's going to happen, and prepare ourselves for it, not play into it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, it's always tougher to rally the people behind an idea, or people to support an idea and to disprove of an idea, right? Okay. So that's the benefit that the Republicans have had, right? They go towards take away your guns, take away your religion.
Yeah. Also,
so it's very easy to create narratives around the boogeyman, right?
Also, like, the narratives that they sell has been part of the mainstream of American history, culture, a lot longer than leftists have. They conservatism, racism, white nationalism is like really, like, the country is really steeped in it, right? Like, whenever there's a party that advocates for that, there's going to be a significant portion of the people who gravitate towards that just because it's the only thing that they're familiar with, right? So it's like we need to boldly present them the other option.
So it's a challenge, though. It's a challenge.
It is, and like, if failures, setbacks, I mean, there's no real, like, if when your guy loses in the primary, or your guy loses an election, you have no other option really but to keep the fight going, right? And to keep on organizing the same way, and then hope for the best, but prepare, as originally as you can. But it's like it's I feel like that's the goal. The goal should be
and the challenge is these figures that have been around for a long time.
Yeah,
their inaction has led to sort of the biggest issues that they face, which is voter skepticism, right? So even on the left, people are saying to themselves, even though my ideas maybe, or my values maybe align more with this party, I've been hoodwinked enough times.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
And like,
so I've been screwed over enough times where and you hear that talking point every single time.
Oftentimes too,
this is the most important election of your lifetime.
Yeah.
It seems like every single election is the most important election of your lifetime, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the boy who cried wolf. When you say that the 2020 election is the most important election that you ever, because people become desensitized to it. That is not what you said about 2016, 2004, you know what I mean? 2008. So I think that's why I right off the bat was talking about the fact that it's easy to just hone in on Joe Biden, but the challenge is you're not seeing any changes in the lawmaking, institutions of the government, the House and Senate. You're not seeing any fresh ideas. You're not seeing new leadership. You're not seeing, when you think about housing affordability, when you think about climate change, when you think about some of these issues that we as the younger generation or youth kind of are going to be grappling with throughout our lifetime. You would think that it would be sensible for our ideas to be considered, not automatically adopted, but to at least be brought to the forefront.
Well, yeah, right? I feel like go ahead.
There are Democrats or there are liberals who know how TikTok works. Right? It's not that they don't exist at all. It's that they get sidelined, right?
Yeah.
And they're forced to take on this almost apprenticeship role.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know how it works. You got to write a briefing for me, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about it.
Well,
but then when these executives come in, these executives already know that Chuck Schumer is not going to be effectively grilling them, Larry Nadler, whatever the case may be, well, whatever leadership is.
Yeah.
He's not going to be effectively grilling them. So aside from the opening statement, which was crafted probably by someone who uses social media,
I would say, like, what I think, I think it's a misinterpretation, misreading of politics, which is central to the preservation of power by the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, is that the majority of Americans prefer a candidate who's in the middle of the two, who's moderate, right? Although that might be the case with the regularly voting public, that's not the case with, not necessarily the case with the people who are eligible to vote. It's just that 100 million people don't vote, right? So what the Democratic Party attempts to do, and this was one amazing thing about Bernie's campaign, was as opposed to trying to peel off moderate Republicans, you appeal to those people who haven't been voting, right? And whatnot, people who have been historically disenfranchised. And that appeal isn't necessarily something that's to the right or to a moderate position. Oftentimes, it's that populist, left-wing, socialist politics, right? Things that are tangible to people, right? You think about many of the programs which are considered socialist are things that are tangibly benefiting the lives of people in the reddest states, right? Kentucky, one of the poorest states, they elected Mitch McConnell, but they have highest uses of food stamps. Right? That's socialistic, like Medicaid, a lot of these programs which the Republicans attempt to undermine, right? And are socialistic in nature, are things that are understood and liked by these people in this quote-unquote red state, right? That's why, like, in that primary, which was in that Kentucky primary, which is so upsetting, is that even though there was a left challenger who in the primary who was polling pretty well with against Mitch McConnell and might have actually won, that belief that we need somebody moderate led them to taking another candidate whose polling has been disastrous. So that seat is probably going to go to Mitch McConnell. That would have been a tight race if there was a leftist candidate. So that whole belief that centrism and moderation is going to be more appealing to voters even in red states is a canard. And I mean, the way we undo that is by, I think, hopefully, the first step would be to win in the safe states, right? So, like, in Kentucky, the Democratic Party can say to the Democratic establishment can say to the primary voting populace, tell them, okay, whatever your policy stance on the issues are, even if you favor this left challenger, this election's so important, we can't risk it. We need to win a moderate, right? They can use that argument, even though I've shown it's flawed. They can use that argument in a Republican red, blues, purple state. In a place like New York, where Jamal Bowman beat Elliot Engels, that's not going to happen. Lacey Clay's, when Cori Bush beat him in Missouri, in St. Louis, that's not going to happen there. Like, those are solid blue states where the person who wins the primary wins the election, right? And that whole appeal to centrism and moderation that the Democratic Party would use to undermine a left candidate, it has no validity. So you win in those states, you primary everybody you can, every moderate you can, to shift the Democratic Party much more leftward, right? That way, the person who tries to, take a stance, a left stance in a purple state or a blue state, is not one of a handful of left people who can be portrayed as an outsider. He's going to be part of an ascended political bloc, right? So you win the elections in New York, you win the elections in California, you win those primary elections in the states that the Democratic Party controls, and then you leverage that to win later in those purple or redder states, right? Even though that appeal would be, I think, could be made right now. I think that if the Democratic Party went out, I totally believe that if the primary went another way in Kentucky, if Amy McGrath is the candidate, if she didn't win, then Mitch McConnell might have lost. But now it's like a lock for Mitch McConnell. I thought that could have happened in this election cycle. Who's to say what will happen in 2024, right? 2028, 2022, and the 2026 in between, right? But the shifting of the Democratic Party is definitely going to have to be done, but that's only done through active participation within it, distasteful as that might be. So that's like the only thing that I really do get upset when I hear about from the left is like this talk about electoralism being useless. Okay, like the thing is, the benefits have been very unsubstantial, right? At least in our political memory, right? You think about Barack Obama. Obamacare is not like a thrilling policy. It's not what we want. However, the pre-existing condition stipulation, that's like a tangible benefit for people's lives, right? That's not something that definitely would not have happened, right? The Republican healthcare plan was the status quo before Obama took over, right? There was no attempt by the Democratic Party to change it effectively since LBJ and Medicare, right? Ever since then, it's been like really that field has been dominated by Republicans. So like even that tiny benefit.
It's funny you mention these large scale programs though, because I've had the feeling that something's got to give.
Yeah.
Some large scale program has to be in the works, because for billionaires to pay $750 in taxes, and the average person, well, I'm talking about the average like food worker, is paying more than double that during cases. It's just untenable. How long can you keep people accepting that kind of status quo, right? And you see the argument made that they pay less taxes, and then that way they can spend their money on more efficient endeavors. And it's not even a question of government spending; it's a question of fairness, right? And what you should pay in comparison to what people who make a lot more money than you pay, right? And there's already in law, the corporation is separate from the individual. So if the argument is that this guy creates jobs, well, his company under the law is an individual, and they don't get taxed that much, right?
Yeah.
So I don't understand how you extend that to the individual too.
Well, the thing is, like, when you say something should give, what's weird is that, like, a lot of the reason it hasn't is because of the Democratic Party, right? Where they attempt to frame things at the very least. They attempt to say that they're, like, perfectly fine, right? Like, under, like, Hillary Clinton's response to Donald Trump's Make America Great Again was America was already great, right? And that is just a degree of tone deafness, which is, like, a bit shocking. It's a bit jarring, right?
I mean, America is already great to those who are benefiting from the current political climate, right? Yeah. So you're right. There was a tone deafness there. But what do you expect from the Clintons, right?
No, but what I'm saying is, though, is like they see themselves as you know, a lot of their job is to tamp down that pressure that would have led to a positive, like a large-scale transformation, right? Like before, you know, before people get angry enough to do something, let's give a little bit to keep them placated, so that the system as it is can continue. Yeah. So, but that's the thing. It's like that's.
But okay. When you look at, for example, the housing situation. In many major cities, and I'm glad that this kind of work from home setup is starting to become more normal, because people are waking up and deciding, hey, I don't want to pay $2,000 to live in a shoebox in New York. I think I can just pack up and move elsewhere, right? Yeah. And so much of this kind of craziness was just pushed on to the younger generations, right? Yeah. So, would the older generations be okay with spending 3/4 of their paycheck in certain circumstances just to make rent? Probably not, right? No. And there would be kind of an uproar, right? But we're just told to kind of, that's the way it is, and you got to work harder, and Well, I
Yeah.
think that people are starting to question that, right? Like, you say you are saving for a down payment in one of these larger cities.
Well, that's the thing. It's like
the biggest metropolises. The wages are not keeping up with the cost of housing and the cost of inflation, right?
Well, the thing is, though, like with housing, like there's like a flip side of the issue, right? When you think about like the housing costs, if you're like a young person trying to go buy a house or trying to rent or to get a place, then the reduction of the prices is good for you. But if you're already established and you see your net worth as tied to the value of your property, your assets, then you don't. So it's like in the Democratic Party, it's going to be hard when the speaker,
right?
like Nancy Pelosi's made her money as a landlord, right? So if you take active steps to make renting cheaper and easier, you're going to be cutting into her bottom line, right? So obviously, like that's one example in which like the personal interests of a Democratic Party leader is in contradiction to the interests of the vast majority of the people that we hope to represent, right? So that's a person who needs to be identified and bumped out of the party, right? Nancy Pelosi should I don't want to get into talk about her current primary competitor. I think that guy's really distasteful to me, but his accusations against him the thing is like people like her should be primaries, right?
What happened?
I don't want to I don't want to. It's not the topic of the podcast, but there's a pattern of weird sex creepiness. Which I don't know why the left is not discussing, but but the thing is
I think there's an assumption that she's going to win, right?
Yes, for sure. But what I'm saying is that people like her need to be made a minority of the Democratic Party, and the only way that's done is by organizing and building up solid left competitors, right? And best places to do that is starting in the most blue states, right? The most blue districts, the places that Also, the main benefit of another main benefit of that is you don't have to pay for a primary in an election. You just have to pay for the primary, right? So you can spend all your resources knocking out that one person, right? And the thing is, it's hard to do it's impossible to do if you only approach people every 2 years or every 4 years, right? If you only come to them in the course of election and just say, hey, this is another candidate that you should vote for. But if you bring them into a movement which they see as being a step forward and something that can make a tangible, I keep on saying it over and over, tangible benefits in their lives, then it's going to be a different dynamic, right? Then they come into the primary with you, as opposed to you trying to knock on their door as a complete stranger, right? These things are often done much more effectively if it's from somebody right? You're much more. You have a better chance of shifting my political views than a stranger who knocked on my door, just because of the relationship that we have and the trust that we built up, right? And the way our conversations might naturally evolve, right? So you would be better able to inform me about an issue, a change of a misconception I might have had, motivate me to actively participate in something because you actively know me, right? So if you begin to organize with your social groups, your things that your work groups, right? Friends, extended community networks, things like that. Bring politics into your everyday life and be much more of an activist in that regard. Then you increase the chances of a left candidate changing the face of the Democratic Party in the next primary, right? It's not enough to just say that the Democratic Party sucks, right? It does. I agree. Change it, right? And we're not going to be able to change it in between now and November, that's the work that needs to be done. And it is important to know that Donald Trump's presidency makes that harder, right? Just because, like I said, they make union organizing harder, right? They make harder for people to vote, harder for people to register. You see all the election shenanigans that they're pulling right now, attempting to disenfranchise people. And you'll see, as you see every single year in Republican states, Black communities, Latino communities, right? We have huge hour-long lineups, right? So, like, it's again, all these frustrations with Biden and the current shape of the Democratic Party, I totally understand, but none of these really translate to me as reasons not to vote for him, right? Because again, it's just a strategic vote.
Hopefully the leadership goes through a whole-scale change. They kind of reminds me of Norm Kelly. Remember Norm Kelly? He went away.
Yeah.
He ran away quietly. He was this guy that couldn't get off your timeline. I think there was even though for listeners who don't know, he was a city councilor who was representing riding in Toronto, enjoyed prevalence by being attached to Drake, and went with the moniker Six Dad, had a staffer tweet things to make him seem hip with
I was generally under the impression that it was him tweeting it. I didn't know it was a staffer.
No, come on, it was a staffer.
It makes sense. I don't know why I was so stupid to believe it.
Yeah, you can even tell, man. You know how old Norm Kelly is? Some of these tweets were coming in the evening. Definitely not tweeting this. He's not tweeting Lil B at like 10:58.
Oh no, this guy's in bed after Jeopardy. You know, he just drinks a cup of prune juice and then he goes to sleep. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. And he was enjoying all of this popularity until the new premier slashed City Hall in half.
That's the thing. So we hate Doug Ford. He did that for a very catty reason.
He got rid of Mamalidi and Norm Kelly in one swoop.
Yeah, that's the one thing. That's what I was going to say. He got rid of Mamalidi, and I guess Norm Kelly too.
In one swoop.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like
Jim Karagianis got rid of himself.
Yeah, I see the
election fraud.
Oh yeah, he got. We're like way inside Toronto municipal politics. Yeah.
That's true.
But like the inside
but these
baseball.
are fascinating stories. Our listeners will enjoy the name dropping we're doing because follow us.
You can spend some time. Actually, it would be worth your time googling any one of these names, especially that last guy who lost, who got bumped out. He had 3 court judges remove him from office, pretty much.
Yeah. And then the Supreme Court refused to hear his case.
Yeah.
That's how desperate politicians can get, man.
And also, America, that's an option.
You know what's funny? Politicians are always talking about retraining yourself back to the new workplace.
But they are incapable of doing it themselves.
We'll take the case to the Supreme Court.
Actually, do you want to do you remember Andrew Gillum?
Oh man,
is that like another episode all of its own?
Yeah, I think Andrew Gillum, because we're approaching an hour, I think Andrew Gillum has to be episode.
Okay, because I feel when you say they can't...
It involves the coke, just so we can do a trailer.
Yeah.
For our audience. It involves the coke bench. It involves a prostitute in a Miami hotel. The Miami PD taking pictures of this guy. I think he lost... A guy who went from almost capturing the governor's office in Florida, okay, losing to, as they call him, DeSantis now, losing to DeSantis, from the highest of highs, having Obama and the other Democratic leadership embrace him. He was called the new Obama, which I'm thinking the Democratic Party thinks that all black people are the same.
Yeah.
Every few years I hear about the new Obama. But anyway, he was touted as being the new Obama. So from the new Obama to slumped in his own vomit in a Miami hotel room to coming 6 months later to the public and saying that he's ready to rejoin politics and he has a secret, and that is that he's ready to reveal to the world and that he's bi, with his wife beside him, talking about how it was part of the covenant.
This is one of those trailers that gives away the entire movie.
I know, but we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk. There's too much fucking jokes
in
this story. So,
but
yeah. I don't want to give the whole thing away. There are a few tidbits. There are a few key tidbits actually that I did refrain from talking about that are worthwhile.
We'll look forward to it, folks.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for our next exciting episode, where hopefully one of our upcoming episodes where we'll talk about the debates are coming up. Did you have any thoughts about that you wanted to share?
Okay, so Donald Trump, it's not lost on me that the tax return story got released right before the debates, right? So I'm not approaching it from the conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I'm thinking that he has a lot. He's going to have to throw away a lot of what he wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And I expect those to come up, right? Questions about spending $70,000 on hair. However, again, I think I mentioned to you, of course, the scrutiny should be on Donald Trump. But if you think that other wealthy people are not getting away with
for sure.
things like this,
well, Donald Trump, the way he's framed it, he's bragged about tax evasion, saying that it's smart not to play. And he also points out accurately that the system that he's manipulated was the one that was created by the politicians who are criticizing him. Right? So, like, when Joe Biden, his capacity as Obama's vice president, helps push a tax bill that Donald Trump then uses to make get $72 million back, it doesn't make sense for the people who gave him that money to criticize him for taking it. He would have actually, I would say, I would have had to have been an idiot not to take it. Right?
Yeah.
Which is going to resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, the taxes are not popular.
No,
right?
it's not.
So if you're going to attack him from
also, attacking him for being broke and being in debt when most of the country is broken in debt. I mean, the only way you can make him more relatable is by saying he's also addicted to fentanyl, man. It's like...
Yeah, I know.
It's so tone deaf. But and also...
I didn't expect them to go down the rap route.
The thing...
That sounds like an attack a rapper would make.
They're actually, I've seen the Lincoln Project quoting rap songs, and they're like, if you're broke, something, get the fuck out of here, or something like that.
Man.
That's me.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see Joe Biden string sentences together.
There's a tweet that I saw.
I'm genuinely excited to see that, okay? And the thing is, I know he's overcome a speech impediment. My issue is not the speech impediment, okay? There's a difference between a speech impediment and maintaining a line of reasoning.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see the line of reasoning.
Well, actually, I was
string together ideas.
What I think though was that like usually when he loses his trains of thought, it's when he's trying to go on a pre-scripted message, right? That he just kind of gets muddled in his head. But when he's speaking like off the cuff, which much of a debate would probably be, reacting to what's going on, the only problem is he sometimes says something racist, right? He just doesn't stutter. So it's like, hopefully we'll see what we're gonna get. My biggest hope is that there's a fight. I feel like that's what it's probably going to be. It's just going to be a bunch of bickering and whatnot between two narcissistic old guys, grumpy old guys. And, let's see, hopefully they just start fighting each other. That's I think the most, because you're not going to get any policy discussion. You're not really going to get anything that's going to shift anybody's vote. So if you're just going to get two people arguing, then actually just go all out, Make it as entertaining as possible. I think but we'll see. I feel like the one thing about the Donald Trump, like the tax thing, is like people were pointing out. Also, this was totally tone deaf, pointing out how many taxes Joe Biden and Barack Obama paid to compare them to, right? And just like I had no idea they were doing that well. Like Joe Biden in his first year out of office made like he paid like $3.9 million or like $3.6 million in taxes, right? You imagine how much he would have to make to pay that much in federal income tax. And that's like, as a former vice president, that's all in this. That's like a shocking amount of money to make on the speaking circuit for a guy who can't even speak, you know? It's fucking shocking.
Oh my
but
God.
it's so like tone deaf. Like,
imagine how much more he would get paid if he actually finished them.
Dude, this guy would be a billionaire. He wouldn't have to run. But yeah, no, it's
Okay. But I feel like for our podcast, we should. I want to introduce a new segment where we talk about just one random international story. We kind of did it a bit with the Toronto thing. For our listeners who are focused on like U.S. politics, but I did want to cover one kind of funny story. One tragic story, but it's kind of fucking funny.
What?
So
Brad Parscale?
In Melbourne, there was a drug support worker at a safe injection room that was jailed for selling heroin to addicts.
I mean,
so he was released back into the community because he didn't agree with the sentence.
Okay.
So
I didn't know that was a option.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of fucking funny. First of all, he thought that he could. Dude. First of all, drug dealing is hard work. Okay. Drug dealing is hard work. If it was that easy, do you think these rappers would be dying? Do you think these gangsters in the street would be dying?
No.
You can't. Imagine you saw a guy who's a drug dealer trying to volunteer at a safe injection site. Okay, first of all, that's already fucked up that he thought it was going to be that easy. Second of all, when people talk about like white privilege, people sometimes say, "Oh, it's a figment of our imagination." This motherfucker didn't agree with his sentence and was let go.
That's amazing.
Like you said, we didn't know that was an option.
What was I have to find out what the legal reasoning for letting him go was. That's like what?
He didn't agree with the sentence. I'm imagining the judge said, you know what? You're right. It doesn't make sense. And he hit the gavel and he let him go.
No, if I ever commit a crime, let's say the judge says, Ahmed Salah, the jury finds you guilty, and after weighing all the evidence, I find you, I'm going to sentence you to 20 years. I'll be like 0. And he goes, okay, 10. No, 0. 5. 0. 2.5. Okay, all right, we'll go 1.25 years. Okay, great. Let's deal. Maybe that's what I'll do. But even then, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it down to 0.
Oh, my God. I just imagine a guy in the defendant room, in the courtroom, as a defendant, and the judge goes, I'm thinking 1 to 3 years, and he just dramatically takes his lawyer's suitcase, slams it shut, and says, "No deal."
Yeah, no, it's like the guy, he explained to the judge, I mean, isn't it bad enough that I'm living in Australia?
Yeah.
Do you really need to punish me more? And the guy is like, you know what, I come to think of it, you're right. Let him go.
But yeah, man, I like to uncover these funny international stories. We should do that, because there's so much going on. There's so much shit going on.
Yeah.
And these kind of stories fly under the radar, right? So
yeah, no, for sure. You kind of caught me off guard. I didn't know to get one, but I did kind of bring my own new segment to the podcast on YouTube. We now are the proud owners of a YouTube channel in which I will do routine jokes, and I will post videos when I have to do a solo episode, or I will also plan to do, once I get much more familiar with a video compilation, I will attempt to make longer form video essays. For now, though, you can look forward to jokes. There are already 2 of them up up on our YouTube channel, links to which you can find either by going on our Twitter page or by YouTubing the name of the YouTube searching the name of the show, AA Meetings with Abdi and Abdi, and it'll pop up there. So I mean, I hope you enjoy those. Right now though, like going back, one last point I wanted to make about the election was that early voting is running in many states, we think about the potential Trump shenanigans. I think maybe in another episode we'll talk about the vote rigging and what might happen after the election. But we know that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are attempting to cast aspersions on the validity of mail-in ballots. And although there are significant risks to, significant, if there are risks to going to vote in person, those are definitely mitigated if you go vote early, right? Right now, voting in person has the same risk as going to the grocery store, which is, I don't want to undermine that. There are some people for whom going in certain communities where going to the grocery store might not be something you want to. Yeah, it might not be like a. Yeah, it might be a bit of an anxiety inducing. I think though, like voting early if you can now is probably the best you could do. The reason I always vote, for me, I vote. I'm a strategic voter in Canada, so I live in a riding where it's either going to be the Liberals or the Conservatives, and I'm going to have to vote for either one of them. And I strategically vote, and since that process is distasteful to me, I vote early, and it's very quick. Like, it's a 15-minute thing that I just do just to get it over with. And I do it on the day, because early voting is like, there's a window. I do it on the day where I feel like, it would be the least of a disruption. So keep an eye out for what your early voting days are. It'll definitely be easier to vote than voting in line in the elections, and you cancel out all the potential chicanery that Donald Trump might do with the the mail-in votes, right? Because we'll talk about this in another episode. But what it's shaping up to be is that Democrats are much more likely to vote through mail than through in-person voting. We know from the primaries that in the Democratic primary, 25% of the mail-in ballots were rejected for various reasons. Right, so higher percentage than the in-person polling. But also that it's important to have the election day results be as bad for Donald Trump as possible. Because if there is a Donald Trump lead before the mail-in ballots are put in, that's going to, add momentum to their attempt to steal it, right? So that's the two most important things I urge you to, in order of importance, is checking out our YouTube channel and watching our videos, and then voting early in the way that's least distasteful for you. Well, it's nice to have you back, Abdi.
Yeah, it was nice discussion, man. Nice discussion. I'm returning to work too, so this was productive Monday.
All right. Yeah. All right, take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy.
Yeah, take care.